Welcome back everyone to another episode about how to make your documentary film. We're in the pre-production phase. Today we're talking about the graphic elements that come into your film. These can be pretty important to get into the pre-production process. So what do you think?
I agree. I think knowing what sort of graphics you want really early on is really helpful because it gives you time to actually engage the right person to create them.
Yeah, I remember when we were working on Conquering Cancer and we were putting out some proof of concept films early. And one of the pieces of feedback we were getting from some of the potential funders was, what's with the graphics? Because they were temp graphics and they were really looking for something that was more branded. And once we did the branding of the things like the straps, lower thirds, name titles, on-screen titles, we were much more successful in terms of being able to attract the rest of the finance we needed into the film. For some investors, this element is really important, and I think it is worth bumping it into the pre-production part of the process.
And I think once you've been doing your you created your proposal early on in the development phase, and that proposal probably already got you thinking a bit about graphic design and how you wanted it to look on paper and what sort of images, colours, logos, all of that kind of stuff. You probably have already got quite a few ideas, even maybe around the poster. So this is where that starts to inform that graphics package. You know, what are those lower thirds or straps going to look like, and how will they come onto the screen, and all of those kinds of elements.
Yeah, so we often will send this out to a graphic designer. You can shop around. There's lots of great websites to help you find one if you don't already know one, and ask for a series of deliverables that we find really helpful as we get into the production and post-production phases of the film. So, you know, we're looking for things like, that name title, lower third, which is often on a semi-transparency, has colour or textural elements to it, maybe some design elements to it that reflect the story you're telling, and a really legible font so that you can read people's names and titles as well.
Yeah, being able to read them is really important because sometimes, really fancy fonts can look visually really interesting, but if people can't read them really easily and quickly, they're probably not the right choice.
In terms of accessibility, colours is really important. I think we need to think about our audience who, may be colourblind as well. So you need really high contrast colours, so that everyone can read these titles on screens and not colours that can be really difficult for some people to read, particularly I think in that kind of red, orange, yellow part of the spectrum can be really difficult for a lot of people.
So if you were going to be briefing in a graphic designer to create some of these elements, what are the key things you'd be asking them to do?
Well, essentially we're looking for a brand guide for the motion graphics part of the film, and the things that are really helpful can be like full screen cards, because you might have full screen title cards, for example, in your trailer. So they're going to have a background, which is either going to be clean, or it might be textured, or it might be colourful, or it might be somewhat representative of your poster art if you've got that far down the road as well. It's going to have typography in it. It's going to have fonts on it, and they need to be easy to read but also be consistent, with what's going to be going through your film. You're going to need that strap, the lower third, for people's names. You're going to need any on-screen title elements that you're likely to overlay. They need to be designed at this point as well. All of these materials need to be editable by you so that you can change them and adapt them as you go along. Sometimes I ask for just clean, full screen, 4K or whatever format you're working to, textural elements as well. So these are graphics that we can bring in and add things on top of as a layer. That can be really helpful to get a suite of those that are complementary to the film brand that you're creating. These are the types of things that I'm briefing in. I think it's worth talking about social media and the other types of communications we're doing for the film at this point as well. We're in pre-production now and we're building an audience now, and all of those types of materials that I've been talking about for the film also can be quite helpful for the film marketing. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so film marketing, it is a really important thing. You've probably already started thinking about that in your development phase, but you want to start, owning your social platforms and making sure that those different social platforms are available with the name that you've chosen. And we talked about this when you're picking a title for your film in that episode. We went into a lot more detail on this. So you can definitely jump back there if you want a bit more on, you know, how you pick those social platforms and how you pick the names for them. But now, yeah, you do want to think about the branding. What icon is going to represent your film across social media? Yep. You know, your header images and the way that that's put together, because you probably want the same graphic designer who's doing your poster and your graphics package to also be creating those other elements for you as well.
That's right. So these elements that we use in our filmmaking, particularly those textures and colours, can be really helpful on your website. If you make your website for your film as layers and elements there, the fonts, the colours, they're all really important. So this goes into a brand guide that reaches beyond your film and actually reaches right across.
So one other part of the graphics package is animations.
Yeah, so I think animation's usually done by a different designer. You know, we're now talking about someone who's got experience creating animations, and it will often go off to a team. And this can be a really time-consuming sort of part of the process as well. And I know when we've done custom animations for our films, they can actually take months to get right. So you actually need to build it into your pre-production plan so that that work's taking place during production. But when we're thinking about the aesthetic of the film, I think those elements need to be informed by whatever the brand guide is as well. So if you've got really prominent colours, for example, in your branded elements and being used elsewhere in the film, it's really important that your animation house knows about those so they can try and create something complementary as well. I think storyboarding is very helpful for briefing animators, you know, really thinking through what are the key things you're trying to represent visually. And giving them a really clear guide to that, because every frame of animation that they create will cost you money. So if these guys want to learn more about this, because we're really getting into the nitty-gritty now of, you know, pre-production, can they find more information?
Yeah, absolutely. Over at Moonshine Communications Academy, there's actually a tab, a resource tab in the top nav on that site, and you'll be able to find, we're creating resources to go with a lot of these episodes that we're creating, because it is a lot of information and it's a lot to try and get your head around, especially if you've not done any kind of graphics packages or brief designers before. So head on over to moonshinecommunicationsacademy.com and just check out the resource section. And don't hesitate to DM us on one of the social platforms if you're looking for something particular and you can't find it.